One of the real joys of working on this show with the Duffer Brothers is they don't want to play it safe. What does it sound like when he's sort of like tuning into someone else?
If it's not bold, it doesn't sound like Stranger Things.
If you're not taking some chances, you're not going to come up with anything really cool.
Welcome to Glen Glenn Film Sound here in Hollywood. Let's go inside and find out what makes Stranger Things sound like Stranger Things. I mix all of the dialogue and music.
I mix all the sound effects and Foley. We were brought in because the Duffers were interested in having feature film mixers because it was clearly getting more and more cinematic. And then we're mixing the first episode going, well, I guess we should just go for it. Like, you know, we've never mixed TV before. I guess let's just make it sound like we would make it sound as a feature. And then, you know, they're walking in for the first playback and I think we're both like, what have we done?
Have we overdone it?
Have we overdone it?
Yeah, yeah.
And we played the first sequence, which was the big machine starting up. And they stood up and started clapping at the end of it. We were like, whew, okay, I think we made it. This is the kind of thing that the Duffers do so well. You hear a sound before you know what it is. But then what's even cooler is it connects on the B-side when you're inside the house. So it gives us the opportunity to use the sound almost as music to sort of create tension. You don't see it at all in this shot, but you hear it. And I've got it panned off over here and kind of moving through the room so that you get some sense that it's sort of splashing back and forth on the window. And then you get the payoff of seeing it on the window and you're like, oh, that's what that was. But in the meantime, it's just this weird sound that kind of is unsettling.
The way we go between scenes is always very stylistic. So there's always something kind of over the top.
We have to save Derek. The Turnbows live here.
We use a lot of soft reverb where it's like, you know, it's like it's not a long, it's like got a little room between the event and the whoo.
Holly! I've been calling you.
Sorry.
It's a very expressive aesthetic. It's all about sort of heightening the feeling of what's happening in the scene. Our sound editors joke that we should call this show Flanger Things because we like using flangers so much. But it's part of the show.
It doesn't sound kind of stylistic enough if we just do a hard cut. So we look for ways in which we can bridge the two scenes. So you can hear how I created this kind of like pre-lap repeater, I guess is a good way of calling it.
You called my house to tell everyone to get the hell out of there.
It's like connective tissue. You know, it's just designed to pull us in. I'll often use a reverb and a delay, or I'll just overuse a reverb. You know, sometimes it's just too stylistic. But when we came onto Stranger Things, it was probably the first thing that was just, I felt like it was really just kind of, really just built for this.
In terms of mixing, we do a lot of controlling high frequencies. And we do a lot of augmenting low frequencies.
So basically, this is Vecna.
Yeah.
Long rest. We can begin.
It's basically a chain of events that was originally created by our fantastic sound designer, Craig Hannigan. And then it's my job to integrate it into the show. So I'm going to play you now some of the performance before any of that treatment.
At long rest, we can begin.
I'll always have his dry performance in the center track, and then I'll start to apply his treatment to the whole room. So for clarity, I can push dry voice, push more treatment. I can do less reverb, more reverb, less sub, more sub. And one of the first plugins that contributes to his treatment is just essentially an EQ, which starts to add some even more low end.
At long rest,
Then we start to introduce some delay.
At long last,
The big one is an octave pitcher.
at long last,
It's about not one plugin doing so much, because then it would start to sound processed. The key to it is there's kind of just stages. And that's kind of how we approach everything. Like, we don't ask anything to do a huge job, like whether it be compression or reverb. We usually have multiple instances so that each one is not being overworked. I think that's the key to how it sounds so clean.
So I'm over here on the sound effects side, and I don't want to ever make him sound small. It's always important from a story point of view that Vecna, when he speaks, it feels like it overwhelms the rest of the room. At first,
at long last,
I played these footsteps as he's approaching, really big, really monstrous, and they're big still. But what I found was if I played them too big, when he started speaking, it was almost like a letdown. Because if everything's big, nothing's big, right? So before he starts speaking, we're really thinning it out. So all the vine sounds get pushed away, his footsteps get pushed away, the orchestration of the music thins out a little bit. And it's almost like pulling back the bow so that when Vecna speaks, it's released.
at long last, we can begin.
This is what mixing's all about. People think it's about pushing faders and twisting knobs, but it's really about crafting moments and getting the most drama and emotional impact out of the story that's already happening on the screen. How can we best support that with sound? One of the new things that we have in this season is this idea that Will is able to see through various other characters and sort of experience what they're experiencing. The challenge here was to try to figure out a treatment for what does it sound like when he's sort of like tuning into someone else.
My first thought is, what is the reverb inside someone's head? I go to like a very small reverb, a very tight reverb. I start to kind of get rid of all the tails and just use the early reflections. And then I start to just push it louder than I usually would, so that the reverb is louder than the actual voice itself. And suddenly it starts to become interesting. It starts to have an effect, and it starts to make me feel like I'm inside his head.
Behind you!
The way they shot it was really cool, very, point of view and very kind of weird and almost like heat vision or something. So I wanted to try to come up with a way that would sort of signify sonically the same kind of thing of sort of being an imperfect, transmission, really smearing time on Will's shots. It's especially obvious on this fluorescent light. I really pushed it on this one. Kind of thing. Something that we take very seriously when we're working on the show is there a way we can push this farther? Does this feel like Stranger Things yet? Usually if you're asking, the answer is no. So at that point, you're saying, okay, what can we do to push this a little farther? We try to differentiate sonically the world of the upside down versus the world of the right side up. Sometimes we do like weird reverse reverb things and kind of strange slappy things. Part of it is about what we do choose to use in the upside down, but it's equally important that we don't use those same kind of tricks in the right side up. The thunder at the beginning, it's very processed. It has a lot of, kind of weird sounds to it, and it bounces around the room much more than we would on the right side up. There's always sort of a weird, disorienting kind of multi-part echo. Part of what we're trying to say with these reverbs and these echoes and these irregularities is that it's a little unstable. It's different than your normal reality. The way that I get this show to sound like Stranger Things on my side is there's multiple layers of sort of bus compression, bus processing to give it a bit of that sort of, 80s, even 70s kind of sound. So we've got hundreds of sound effects tracks here that make up all the, all these different stems. And then I'm doing tape emulation, I'm doing warm tube saturation, warm tape saturation, warm transformer saturation, taking just some high end off in general and a little bit of gentle multi-band compression here. Think of like an electric guitar, right? Electric guitar, what makes it sound cool is distortion, but it's a pleasant distortion. So you can see how low I have these settings, I'm only doing any of these, 5 or 10%. Like it's just a little bit. I'm also doing some dynamic processing on the center channel specifically to protect for dialogue. So this is being triggered by a sidechain input that's coming from a copy of Mark's stem. So whenever somebody's talking, it's like somebody's taking a little tiny fader and turning down the sound effects, but only in the center channel and only in that dialogue range. The fact that it's not happening across the entire spectrum means if an explosion happens or something during somebody yelling, you're still going to get the power from that explosion, but you're not necessarily going to get, it's not going to get in the way of the dialogue.
What the hell's happening, man? I don't know.
Obviously, the dialogue is, right in the mid-range, and so I'm always trying to protect that range. And then the same goes for the music. With what Mark does, you really need both sides to be sort of talking to each other, because otherwise it doesn't sound cohesive.
There's so many scenes where there's just so much going on, like not everything can play all of the time. The music is just important to the nostalgia of this show. So we work together a lot with handoffs and how we can make everything work together. And from a technical perspective, from my point of view, I have a lot of stereo music. I also have a lot of 5.1 and 7.1s material to deal with. In this example, I have 16 splits, so 16 stems, as we call them, 16 different elements. There's no set amount. It's whatever we feel needs to give me control, because there might be one instrument, for example, that is kind of causing me to have to pull all the music down. When I have that separation, I can just pull that element. So then I am able to keep the energy and keep the intention of the music without having to kind of pull it. And you can see in this cue things that work, things that don't. It works fantastic as a piece of music, but as you incorporate it into the scene, maybe Matt and Ross decide, okay, I don't need to hear that element of the music because we're going to focus on this sound effect, or the other way around. We do exactly the same thing on the other side. Okay, we're not going to play this sound effect because this is the important thing for us in this moment.
One of the cool things about working with filmmakers like the Duffer Brothers is that they use sound in this way that's fundamental to their filmmaking. And you can hear it in, even in their guide track, which is usually just mono sound effects.
Yeah, I think they can definitely envision what it's going to sound like, and it feels like, everything's cut to incorporate that.
One of my favorite things about working on the show is I get to work with Craig Hannigan's amazing sound design. He's the guy responsible for making the Demogorgon sounds, all the crazy machines, all the various monsters. And that's one of the cool things about, a show that has all these cool concepts is they have identifiable sounds. So when you hear a sound like this, you instantly, both you as the audience and the characters instantly know exactly what they're hearing. This is a really good example. They're an iconic part of why this show sounds the way it does.
Every show we work on eventually starts to feel like our baby as well, but this one for me particularly, because we've mixed something close to probably 35 hours of Stranger Things at this point. So
years.
Every single fader move we do just has that extra little bit of meaning to it. It's just an absolute kind of privilege.
It's pretty special. It's pretty cool.